which is kind of astounding to me, honestly. Man, I really have no idea where we even are. Oh, well, look who got us lost this time. It's this map. I followed it perfectly. The mighty ranger came and followed a simple map. Hold on. Where did you even get this map? And what is going on with your facial hair? Oh, well, I actually think you might be quite proud of me. I got it from Honest Abe at a really discounted price. As for the facial hair, I think it makes me look regal and defined, better than your facial hair, which makes you look like, well, as Trolla would say, a woman. Okay, no, that is not a classy look. You look like an extra in Sons of Anarchy. Secondly, I do not look like a woman because my wife doesn't like to kiss the beard that much. So if anything, I get more action without the beard. And third, I'm lost. Is there a point to all this? Forget I said anything. I think I see a local over there. Let's see what's going on here. Excuse me, sir, would you be able to tell me? Whoa, easy there, big guy, easy there. Hold on, I just need to know what or even when we are. What language or dialect even is that? Oh, don't worry about that, Ranger. I speak the language. Unga bunga, bunga. Did we travel to the lower Paleolithic? Woman? Yes. Oh yes, indeed. Yeah. Woman. Oh, yes, she would love an arrow. He's literally saying it in English. Don't worry, it's a different dialect. It's totally different. He's saying you're a great archer. He's very impressed by your masculine look. Woman. Sure, why not? So glad this is so amusing to you. Pretty woman. There it is again. See, he's literally saying English words. Don't worry, he means something completely different. I'm out. Let's just do this stupid video about Stone Age weapons. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerd and nerdettes. Now, in one of my more recent videos, I talked at length about the spear. I kind of started off with the early discovery of the Clacton spear, 400,000 BC, and other analogous finds that were found in Germany to kind of give credence to the first wooden tool that was used by man. I then went from there to more specialized spears like the pilum, and then went to the Scandinavian spear. I also made the statement that the spear really was the most prolific weapon throughout human history that really helped our ancestors get a leg up against bigger, stronger, apex type predators, because as you know, humans as a whole really don't measure up well to large apex predators. But in addition to just carved wood and a spear, there was of course one other tool that helped change the game, and that was the stone. The Stone Age was a huge swath of time in human history, going from the Paleolithic to the Mesolithic to the Neolithic, which covered millions of years. And in that time, there's a lot of different ways in order to make stone tools, starting with the earliest and most simple, which was just pebble tools, then going on to the bifacial tools, which means it would be sharpened on both sides, then on to the flake tools, which are just flakes of the rock or the flint that they would carve off, and then lastly to the bladed tools, which were much more refined, narrower points of the stone. The way they made these tools was by a process called knapping, in which they would take a stone and break it off piece by piece in order to create the desired shape. Now, of course, you need the right type of stone for this. One of the more common stones that was used was called chert. And just so you know, through the course of this video, if this is your passion or you're a professor in this, I apologize, as I will probably say lots of words partially right or mostly wrong. But that was used because it was really hard and rigid, but would flake and break off easily. A subclass of that was flint, which was also a type of chert, and that would break off well. It had a good rigid structure. And then you had obsidian as well. Obsidian can get a razor sharp edge, and crazily enough, it's still used because it can actually get a better edge than steel. So it can actually be sharper than a steel blade at that micro level. And it is really an impressive material, which is volcanic glass at that point. So it's not a stone, but it was used for a similar purpose. The earliest known account of these tools being utilized was the Oldowan period, which was about 2.6 million years ago. In that time frame, it was very rough, crafted stones. They didn't have the bifacial ones at that point. That came later. It was a way of creating tools that would help get meat off of carcasses, doing different functions like that. Very simple type weapons and tools. Those type of tools have been attributed to the Homo habilis. So it was just rough, rudimentary, did its job well. There wasn't any record of hafting at that point where they attach it or fix it to a spear. It was just tools that were used just to break apart things, maybe salvage or harvest carcasses. And then from there, about 1.7 million years to 200,000 years, we have the Acheulean period. Again, I apologize to all you out there who are sensitive to mispronunciations. That's where you're gonna have bifacial stones. So it's gonna be worked on both sides. And that leads us up to the point where you're gonna start seeing hafted spears in archaeological records. Now, one thing that's difficult to do with organic materials like wood and stuff is going to be able to date it or even find it, because it degrades over time, which is why I think the sling was probably attributed much later than it was implemented, because it really is difficult to try and find records of a sling, maybe slightly round rocks, you know, but the stones are easy to find and they hold up well to time. So stones are really something that are going to be able to be tracked and dated with much more accuracy. So in honor of trying to keep up with that timeline, we're gonna do 3 different tests with different Stone Age weapons against the bone armor, sinew, tissue, muscle, things like that. We're gonna start off, of course, with the spear. From there, we're gonna move to the atlatl. So if you're not familiar with the atlatl, it's got these really long darts here with a lever that's gonna help push it further down range. So you're gonna have more accuracy, more speed, more distance. And then of course, we're going to end with the arrows. Now it's still highly debatable when the bow and arrow came out, because there were records of arrows found that date back to 60 or 70,000 years ago, where the atlatl was somewhere around 20 or 17,000 years ago. I doubt that the bow predates that, but it's just harder to determine exactly. And so the necessarily flint arrow tips, but they had a similar look to it, and there's a lot of them found. So it's a little muddled in the water. The way that I made these was simple. All of these are hafted, meaning you have a haft, which is the wooden part. I would cut into the haft for that. From there, I would affix the stone inside of it and make it a little sharper. So I did some work on it to try and customize it and make it a little bit more of an edge once it was placed inside of there. After that, I used the very historically accurate way of affixing it with JB Weld. And then I use jute twine as well to kind of wrap around, give it a little bit of extra stability once it's inside that part of the wood. And then I made sure that was tied down really well by using the time-honored tradition of fast drying super Gorilla Glue. So I have these Stone Age adjacent weapons. The way in which I built them was more modern. I still used hand equipment, didn't use power tools or anything, but the goal is going to be see how these perform and how we would have a chance against large apex predators, because as you may already know, in fossil records, when they're excavating, they find sloughs of like 60 or 70 bones of cave bears. If you're not familiar with cave bears, it's a brown bear but on steroids. They are massive. They thought they were mainly herbivores, but it doesn't change the fact that they could end you in a heartbeat. So they would hunt those things, it's theorized, as a rite of passage for some tribes. So you're going with that. With this here, I want to see how it's going to go against denser bones. If it's going to be a one-trick pony, like I imagine with the stone arrows, if that hits a bone, I wonder if it'll shatter. It is harder than bone, but it is more fragile. So it'll be interesting to see how it moves, how it penetrates into a target, and whether or not it's going to be like reusable. For the stone spear, it was thought that Neanderthal or early modern humans were the first ones to bring it into the light and use it for hunting or defense, and that was around 300,000 BC. But recent discoveries in South Africa put it at possibly closer to 500,000 BC. So in that time, it actually places it with Homo heidelbergensis, which was a much earlier possible ancestor to Neanderthal or early humans. But in the dating, it is much more common to find these types of hafted spears closer to 300,000 BC. So it's more frequent that they find those. There's much less evidence that it was used earlier than that. But for this test, we're going with the bifacial tip, which would be later development, to see how it's going to do. So for test number one, it's going to be the spear, and that's going to be thrusting and throwing attacks. So what I have here to kind of symbolize our cave bear or large prey is our beef ribs. So I'm going to be using these to test and see what happens if the spear hits that bone. Obviously the goal is to thread it through the ribs, but if not, you know, let's see what happens. And then I create this little pouch here. It's like a really thick mat that you rub your feet off on, and that's going to symbolize the fur. It's got a little bit of like a plastic layer behind it, so not as thick or strong as maybe a bear hide, but it'll help keep it in place and be a good analogy to thrusting through. And then depending on how that looks, I may remove that and just try the ribs by themselves. So what you can see is the first two strikes actually were right here. So that was a great example of what happens if you're able to miss the bone, because that went through and through and through. The last one was right here, and that hit that bone, and that caused the spear tip right there. So what I'm going to do is what I want to do is sharpen this up a little again, and then we're going to try the throwing test. So it looks like that throw hit the bone. Oh, gosh dang it. Looks like that throw hit the bone, and yeah, so it caused a fracture. So I think that with the angle of that throw, when it hit, it kind of hit in that point and caused it to fracture there. So there's my tip, and there's my partial wooden spear. So that's going to cut down this a little bit. I might just thrust at it once or twice, because I still have a decent edge. So with those strikes and not having a really good tapered point, you can see that when it hits the bone, it's going to deflect off and not do much. However, when it has that sharp tip, you can tell that the ribs almost guide it into place. So those two strikes up here that went through, I hit the ribs, and the angle of the stone actually helped push it in a little bit. So if you're unlucky enough to get a direct rib shot with the stone spear, I do feel like with a thick bone like this, it might cause your stone to break and fracture as it did here. So that's just adds to the element of danger, right? If you're trying to hunt something, imagine thrusting and then looking back and your tip is gone. You are in dire straits at that point. Quick order of business, guys. I'm going to switch the tests from the bow to the atlatl. So the bow is going to go first and the atlatl second, because the results are really interesting and it'll show better that way. Now, when it comes to bows and arrows, I feel like it's a bit more difficult to place exactly in the records, because the most complete finding they have was the Holmgard bow, which was found in Denmark, which dates to about 7,000 BC. And so they thought it was somewhere around 10,000 BC, because that was a really refined weapon. It would have gone through multiple iterations to get to that level of quality. However, in Ethiopia, they also found a cave that had quite a few what looked to be arrowheads in there, and that dated back to about 74,000 BC. So it's possible archery may have been around for a lot longer than we originally anticipated. For these testings, I'm going to be using my 130-pound Warbow. So it's going to be, I don't know historically where that lines up necessarily as far as how heavy those draws were, but this will be like my oldest, lightest type bow. So I'm going to test it with this one here, but we're going to test and see how these will do and if they will in fact like shatter or blow up. So seeing how the stone tips have been reacting so far, these are going to be up close shots. I only have one camera, so I'm going to have to splice it together a little bit to make it scenic and cool and everything. But these results, I really want to make sure I get close up and the impacts to be close, because I don't want to lose that footage of them hitting the bone as well. So these are my 3 arrowheads here. I'm going to test it against the bone alone, because I want to see how it reacts without that in place. And we're going to go ahead and test some shots with the 130-pound Warbow. All right, here we have shot number 1, which was great because that definitely hit straight bone right there. You can see that broke off, and then there's my arrowhead right here. So that hit right in here, and it hit the bone, but it just obliterated the stone. So this, you can see there's actually bone fragments and particles inside of this, where it hit the tip, actually lodged into the bone, which is pretty dang cool. But you can see when something like this strikes a solid rib bone, that density and that size, it's going to be really difficult. So you do need to thread those ribs for sure. If you don't, you're going to be have one very angry cave bear coming at you. So that was number 2 right there. You can see that the arrowhead broke once again. This one here is lodged inside a little bit. This one splintered quite a bit more, to be honest. That hid the bone and then it kind of transferred into here. So there's some residue from where it went. The remainder of it kind of shattered over here, but you can see behind it punched through everything. But again, it's hitting those ribs. And that is a really small window to try and thread, because if you hit anywhere else, it's over, and those are not going to be able to be used again. The arrows, for sure, I can repurpose these. They'll be a little bit shorter, but you get really one good shot at that, and that's a dangerous gambit to try and hit something large like that with a stone arrowhead. And then, just because it might be cool to see an old arrow in flight, I'm going to take a slow-mo of hitting the target with my last arrow. I'm going to be close because I want to see like the impact and everything happen together. I'll get 2 cameras one of these days, guys, but I just want to do a slow motion shot of that arrow flying into those ribs from about this distance. You know what, guys, save it for the last video that's not up close to get a good clean break through the bone. That's amazingly exciting. I did actually end up breaking the arrowhead as well, but you can see here that actually hit one of the bones and cracked it in half. So I was able to punch through about that far before it slowed down into the hay bale, but that was enough to get through, and that was a direct rib shot. So it actually broke 2 ribs, 1 and 2. I don't know what I did different, or if I made that arrow a little bit better, but that was a much better result, and that was kind of surprising, like in a great way. So I was actually able to punch in through, out the back, break both of those large beef ribs. So that would cause some serious problems if you were a cave bear or a large megafauna. I mean, the mammoths are obviously a lot thicker, but that would be enough to certainly slow it down more than those other ones that kind of bounced off. So that is very exciting. So here we are again, this here, and then we have our clean break right in there through the ribs. So yes, we did it, guys. Now, the most concrete records of the battle come from the European Upper Paleolithic sites, which dates it to around 15,000 BC. In that place, they were able to find some ivory handles that would have most likely been used for this. They were intricate, ornately carved. These were also used by the peoples in the Americas to hunt megafauna, so like woolly mammoths and large creatures like that, which is just astounding to me. But one of the benefits of this thing, for sure, is it's a much better ambush weapon than, let's say, a javelin. You can do it from a position where you are crouched. You can have just as much power from down low, and you can send that across a distance without putting yourself in as much harm by being able to do it hidden. So it was a great jump and step up from there, and then adding, of course, the stone spears, the flint tips to it, gave it more punching power and the better ability to cut. So obsidian would, of course, be better than this. To hit armor, obviously, it's not going to do much, but if you hit a large creature, it's going to be able to punch into that very well. However, one thing that is always important to note is that it was actually predated by our historical findings by the woomera, which was found in Australia. So that was actually the same type of weapon, but it actually predates that in our findings. So the indigenous population of Australia had access to these as well, and those are actually 32,000 BC, I think. So they technically had the first. So after that last test, I've decided to kind of do away with the pouch because these are fragile, and I want to make sure that if it does hit, I actually get a good visceral impact. Be quite as accurate, let's say, because it doesn't have the fur on it. But either way, when I did the stone spear and I punched into it, it gave no resistance at all. It really is the bone, sinew, muscle that's going to be the thing that's going to be hard to get behind. So for this one here, we're using at lateral. I'm going to do a bit of a distance shot, and then I'll do a close-up one. Distance is going to be relatively close because I want to make sure if it does hit, you guys can see the impact. I don't want to be 15, 20, 30 yards away and actually have it hit it and not see what happens, right? So we're going to be relatively close, and then I'll do a close-up shot as well. Try to keep it cool and cinematic. And that was pretty great. That's one of the older spearheads that I have that I made. And the reason why that works so well, I feel, is because that is actually a much narrower spear tip. So if you see here, this one here is a much more narrow, thinner taper than the other one. So it was able to thread through those ribs a lot easier, I feel. So that actually works really, really well in there. I might put this out of order, I think, because the bow was first and this would be a cool one to end on. But that was a great little example of something being small enough and it had good penetration. You can see it went to about there through the hay bale. So that would be enough for a kill shot, no doubt about it. And that really, that worked incredibly well. Wow, that's so cool. I mean, that's really cool. That one being a bit more of a narrow taper, I have this one here. It's a little bit beefier, a little bit more pointed. So I'm gonna try this one. This is gonna be a close-up one to see how this looks in slow motion against that target. So suffice to say, that last shot was very surprising to me. As I said earlier, I did the bow test first, and when the bow would hit the bones, they tended to shatter more dramatically. I don't know if I wasn't hitting them as on point, but this one here, the lateral shot, actually hit the bone square on and was able to punch into the back just a little bit. So you can see that right there is a full intact bone in that spot, and this at lateral dart was actually able to puncture all the way through inside and out with that direct shot, and it didn't even break the arrow tips. So I think the reasoning being is this lower velocity, so it's not exploding into it as quickly, and it actually, that slower thing, kind of like Dune, I feel, where the slow blade pierces the shield. I feel like this is somewhat analogous to that, where the slower blade is able to pierce better than the one going too fast, because that was really definitive right there. It popped out, but that was a deep, deep, deep strike right in there, and that would get stuck. That was a deep, deep shot in there. So even though it bounced out, it was able to punch all the way through, which was kind of astounding to me, honestly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a wise man once said to me, the test isn't over until all the weapons are broken. So we have kind of reached that threshold. Now, the only thing that survived were actually the two at lateral darts, which was actually pretty cool. Spear down, arrows down. Honorable mention to the sling. I've done the bone versus the sling in the past. The sling was thought to be around 7500 BC, which is one of the earliest findings of it for cave drawings, but it's really hard to quantify, like I said earlier in the video. So, I've done that before, so that would still do work. But if this video taught you anything, I hope it's a deep appreciation for the fact that man used to hunt large apex predators with such brittle weapons that you take a wrong thrust, your weapon's toast. You loose an arrow and it hits a bone, that arrow is not reusable. You are out of luck. So it really is just crazy to think about that people were able to take these things down, or it might have been a rite of passage in order to take down such a large creature with something like this. However, very fun video. I was having a blast the whole time, even though all my hard work was getting blown up into smithereens. Still worth it. If you guys have enjoyed this video, let me know. Let me know what I might have missed, anything, any corrections that could be made. I would love to hear about it. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, go and have your own adventure.